welcome back. The business community has welcomed the decision by the Financial Action Task Force to remove South Africa from its grey list. The task force says it's satisfied that the country has addressed the 22 action items needed to tighten financial controls and crack down on illicit money flows. Firstsource Money Executive Director Redge Nkosi joins us now for more perspective. Redge, good to have you on the program this evening. Firstly, South Africa's removal from the grey list has been hailed as a major victory, some say. From an economist standpoint, what does this milestone signify, especially for the country's credibility in global financial markets?
Yeah, well, firstly, it's important to recognize that South Africa was in a dark spot, as it were, with regard to matters of money laundering and terrorist financing. And as such, that doesn't augur well for any country out there. So having been removed from that list, it does show, therefore, that a country will perhaps be a bit respected, if you want, and confidence will certainly flow among those who deal with South Africa internally and externally. So it's a very positive development, in my view. And I think economists all over the country should see this as a positive move, and very, very welcome indeed for all of us.
Yeah. Investor confidence is often tied to perception. How quickly do you think we'll see tangible economic benefits, such as increased capital inflows or even improved trade activity following this delisting?
Well, yeah, there's always a common view that when in fact a country has been moved out of the grey list or even the blacklist, then suddenly there's going to be some flows of capital coming in, and therefore economic activity will improve. Well, there is some sense in that direction, but quite frankly, I don't think we can see much of it because growing the economy and the flows of money that come in are not directly related to South Africa being on the grey list or not on the grey list. Well, obviously not being on the grey list is good. I don't think there's so much tangible evidence that we can see in terms of money having to flow as a consequence of that. But obviously, when it comes to sentiments, it's important to have a country that certainly doesn't have any black spot at all. So we should just see that it is good for the country. But if you want to also measure to see what happened, you'd see what happened in the bond markets. The bond market was quite muted, which essentially tells us that it's an issue that people are factored in and it's good, but nonetheless not affecting the markets as much as people think.
Yeah, but some analysts say that this could be the boost that South Africa needs for a sluggish economy and also its needs as well. In your view, how much of a growth catalyst could this decision realistically be here, Redge? Mr. Nkosi, can you hear me clearly?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, it seems our line is not the best. So what I was saying is that some analysts say that this could then boost South Africa's sluggish economic needs, if you will. In your view, how much of a growth catalyst could this decision realistically be?
Well, honestly, there may not be much of it, but it is positive that we have this development. When it comes to growing the economy or boosting sentiments that are attached to growing the economy, I'm afraid this is going to be a very muted exercise, but nonetheless important, because remember, it is about anti-money laundering and terrorist financing, essentially around there. So monies that flow out, in regard to terrorist financing and perhaps just laundering is going to be curbed, because we'll put measures to do that. But just that alone is not going to brighten the bulbs as to where when it comes to growing the economy and boosting the markets.
Let's take a few steps backward, Redge. South Africa was grey-listed partly because of weak enforcement, despite having good laws on paper. How can we then ensure that enforcement agencies then continue to act independently, but also effectively in the long term?
I think this is very, very important. I think the institutions behind this, which the financial institutions, state and non-state, must continue to work as they are working now. And one hopes that there's not going to be any sluggishness with regard to the enforcement. And but most importantly, is to ensure that we don't, get back to the state capture situation we were in, which gave rise to us being thrown into the grey list. So South Africans, whether government or business, and indeed ordinary people, will have to work together to ensure that we don't slide off this list again and get into bad books with the world. I think this is a game for, or if indeed not just a game, but work for each and every one of us in the country to ensure that we certainly on top of good governance and ensuring that our institutions of state function properly.
The country managed to close, 22 FATF action items in record time. What does this then tell us about South Africa's institutional capacity when there's real political will to reform?
Well, South Africa's institutional capacity is generally very, very good. And if there are people out there who are ready to work, do work indeed. And this also is testament or testimony as well to the fact that we went into there just because of a few people who certainly let us down. But now the gloves are indeed off, and everyone is fighting quite as much as they can. Quite frankly, our institutions are robust, and they will remain robust. They've always been robust. It was just a slip-off, in my view, and I think that that aspect will continue insofar as I can see. And it seems as if government as well is willing and quite ready to maintain the status quo.
Now, as the private sector, from banks to crypto service providers, played a big role in achieving compliance, we understand, what lessons should businesses then take from this experience about internal governance and risk management as well, Redge?
I think it's important not just for businesses, also for government to ensure that there's completely no chance of sliding off when it comes to governance. Risks cannot be ones that we should be taken anyhow by either business or government. And quite frankly, we should ensure that all those are top notch. Otherwise, then again, we're going to be thrown back into where we were. But quite frankly, South Africa is a top-notch country. We just got off the list, got into that list by some dint of mistake that had taken, us aback. Most of us are back because obviously of the so-called state capture. But in my view, risk management, governance are all top-notch in the country. And I think institutions of state as well as private sector are working very hard to ensure that we're all in that top-notch or top range of all countries in the world. Yeah.
But there is concern that post-delisting complacency could creep in as well. What mechanisms or even incentives should be in place then, in your view, to keep the system vigilant, but also prevent a relapse into weak compliance?
I think monitoring is very, very important. In my view, South Africans, whether in government or in private sector, should continue to monitor themselves where they are and how the institutions are performing. Vigilance also by the by players like ourselves, ordinary people, must be there. Each time civil society, for example, each time we see there's a slack here and there, we have to ensure that we talk to each other and make sure that all of us are together in this game. So there is vigilance, in my view, and it is going to be maintained. South Africans are unlikely to want to see themselves sliding off into either black or grey list. So yes, there is going to be cooperation among players in the country as well as citizens indeed.
Yeah, but beyond the financial sector, how might this grey list exit then impact ordinary South Africans, especially small businesses and entrepreneurs who are engaged in cross-border trade?
Fundamentally, cross-border remittances. So many South Africans are remitting funds outside. Some South Africans also receiving funds from across the globe. The lifting of the country out of the grey list means there's going to be a freer flow of funds in and out of the country. That obviously does boost economic activity, isn't it? And that's very positive. So we think that it is going to affect each and every citizen positively, but with regard to growing the economy, that may not necessarily be the key issue that's going to drive us there. But nonetheless, sentiment is going to be positive.
Yeah, but also interesting is that South Africa was delisted alongside countries like Nigeria and Mozambique. What does this regional progress then tell us about Africa's evolving stance, especially on financial transparency and global integration as well?
Well, there's no doubt that much of Africa is integrating with the rest of the world quite vigorously right now. South Africa is highly integrated with the global system. Now that many African countries have gotten out of this list, it shows, quite frankly, that there's going to be broader and more active engagement with the rest of the world, which augurs well for future economic activity, but most importantly, also domestic activity as well, which is so central. I mean, most people domestically were also worried to say, but what's going on here? And as such, that sort of put a dark lead on economic activity. With this list now, with us being off the list, it shows we are able to engage Africans continentally and the rest of the world with a little bit of ease than before.
Yeah.
That obviously means positives for all of us.
Mr. Nkosi, as we wrap, the Financial Action Task Force's next mutual evaluation starts next year in 2026. What should be the top 3 priorities in your view for South Africa between now and then to ensure we not only stay off this list, but build a truly resilient financial system?
South African financial system or financial sector as a whole is highly resilient and it's unlikely to slip off. My sense is that institutions like the Treasury, the Reserve Bank, and the private sector will continue to collaborate very well in this regard to ensure that we remain vigilant and we remain where we are now and not slide off. So there's no doubt that by the time 2026 comes, when this sort of review comes in, South Africa will perhaps even be better than we are right now, in my view.
That was economist and executive director of Firstsource Money, Redge Nkosi, sharing insights on South Africa's successful exit from the Financial Action Task Force's grey list and what lies ahead for the country's financial future.